We got a lot to talk about. Missed out on a lot of stuff. Alabama fans, ha 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 ha, laughing at you, laughing at
Man,
you. What's up with that SEC? Georgia got beat down. Come
whoa.
on, man. All that whining you guys were doing about making the playoffs and this team didn't deserve it, that team didn't deserve it. No, you didn't deserve it. Take your fourth loss.
Man, and that's something else too with the SEC. And then the only team from the SEC that's left is a team that had just come into the SEC. So you can kind of say the Big 12 is finally in the playoffs. But as Texas is in the SEC, the SEC did not look that good in bowl season. And I know in past years, when the SEC hasn't looked good throughout the season, they say we get to prove our supremacy in the bowl season. Not this bowl season. A lot of things going on with the playoffs. We saw Ashton Genty, the running back, going after Barry Sanders' record. Even including the postseason, he didn't hit Barry.
Yeah, I don't understand stats these days. If they're not going to include Barry Sanders' bowl game, why would you include Genty? And if Boise State would have won, then he plays another game and gets another
Exactly.
opportunity to break his record. And people are saying, "Oh, he broke Barry Sanders' record." I'm glad he didn't get there. I don't really care that they lost, but stats these days, they're not your father's stats. Sports these days, there's almost nothing that
No,
is your father's sport. We can talk about Mike Evans. He had to get a catch with 30 seconds left in the game. The game was over, a meaningless catch
that's
just
what
to
it
get
was.
over 1,000 yards, so they could say he got 1,000 yards in 11 straight seasons. But he also needed 17 games, and he needed that last pass when the game was over. And people are gonna say, "Well, he did miss like 3.5 games over there." Hey, injuries are part of football.
Yep.
If it was a 16-game season, he would not have gotten to that 1,000 yard mark.
Yeah, and I heard how it went down. You said it was a meaningless stat, which it was. They are in the playoffs, but then they mentioned him with Jerry Rice. He and Jerry Rice, the only two. Man, they mentioned him with Jerry Rice. Now, Mike Evans is not a bad player. He may even be a future Hall of Famer, which likely is going to happen. But Jerry
Mhm.
Rice, man, you can't even mention him and Chris Carter. You can't mention him and Randy Moss. Jerry Rice, come on, man. Now, take it for what it is. This is new age sports, and people acting like what's going on now is something completely new in sports. But that's Mike Evans going on, but a little bit rewinding a little bit to this college football, going with Ashton Genty, not hitting Barry Sanders' record. And he's not the only one because a few years back, well, several years back, it was Christian McCaffrey. He was the one that was breaking Barry Sanders' all purpose yards, but with the same benefit of postseason stats. Barry Sanders did not get any credit for the 222 yards he ran against Wyoming in the Holiday Bowl at the old Jack Murphy Stadium. I think 4 touchdowns that day, too. That's not added on because if so, he'll be even closer to 3,000 yards, and it will be even more impossible to try to reach his record. There's been two running backs who've been getting close in the past 10 years, Kevin Smith from UCF, and now Ashton Genty, who I do believe is a special running back, but Penn State had his number because that's all Boise State had.
Yeah, I gotta give respect to Saquon Barkley because I think he recognizes the real deal, right? If he went out there and he broke, which isn't really the NFL record, if you ask me. If he broke Eric Dickerson's rushing record, he knows he did it in the 17th extra game. But what drives me crazy is people do not acknowledge that Eric Dickerson's record came in 16 games, and OJ did 2,003 yards in 14 games.
14
He
games.
needed two more games to beat OJ's record. Come on.
Now, incidentally, when I look at OJ Simpson and say that he did it in 14 years, and you look at today's players,
Game.
or even now with the 17 games, Barry Sanders is the only one, in my opinion, that kind of ranks up there with what OJ did. Only because even though it was a 16-game season, the 2,000 yards he had gotten on the nose was in 14 games because his first two games, he had 53 yards. When Bobby Ross first got in, they put the fullback in front of him, and everybody thought it was a mistake, and it looked like it was. I think it was Tommy Vardell as the starting fullback. Barry had 53 yards in the first two games, but the last 14 games, he hit 2,000 on the nose. Still less than what OJ did in 14 straight, 14 games back in 76.
Yeah, well, you can say he over a 14 game span he ran for 2,000 yards, but then the
But
counter
no one
to
else had
that
done it.
is right. But the counter to that is if it was a 14 game season, he wouldn't have had those last
No,
two
he would
games.
have had those last
So
two games,
I
exactly.
mean, to me, OJ's the true record holder.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But and now we're going to have these astronomical records, and now you're looking at nearly mediocre quarterbacks now stepping into the record books or at least being mentioned. Even Jameis Winston a few years ago, they're talking about him passing for 5,000 yards. And that's Jameis Winston. And we look at what he is now, what he's been throughout his career, and now we have these absolutely ridiculous records that are now being broken, whether it's going to be a sack record. So someone's going to break Michael Strahan's record eventually. They already broke Lawrence Taylor's record because, well, he was the one who broke it. Michael Strahan, another giant. And just look at the NFL now. The playoffs are finally here. And I think going into these playoffs, Kansas City didn't care about being undefeated because that wasn't an opportunity or an option. They were 15-1. They didn't care about losing a second game. As long as they got their rest, they got their rest. They lost their game, and they didn't care about a second loss.
I question whether the backups even tried to win that game. They got totally destroyed.
Destroyed. No
I
one
mean,
tried winning that game.
it, I mean, I guess I can't blame them because if they beat the Broncos, there's a chance the Bengals get in, and if they got to play Joe Burrow's the one with the best record against
Yep.
Pat. So I guess I can't blame them, but man, there was like no effort. What was it, 38-0 they lost or
Yeah,
something?
they just got blown out. I think it was
I mean,
38 to zip.
they may have been the Bears yesterday.
Hey, you know what? It also made Bo Nix look a little better, if not a lot better. 4 more touchdowns for him. Now, really in the mix for the Rookie of the Year trophy. I don't think it's going to go to him, but he has a serious argument now to be Rookie of the Year. But in any event, Denver, big turnaround. Sean Payton got his team into the playoffs now. No one would have thought that, especially with a rookie quarterback, but they're there. Well, Kansas City, as we saw, is there as well. But then we got to go back a little bit talking about playoff football, but the elephant in the room, Jared Mayo out at out in New England after one season. Some people making a big deal out of it. I look at it and say, that's just football. He should have never got the opportunity to begin with.
Well, I mean, I guess you can make that argument, but what were the Patriots' expectations this year? Can you say that he failed as a coach? I don't think you can say he failed as a coach. So maybe they shouldn't have hired him to begin with. But since he's there, I think the Patriots performed better than most people expected.
I don't know what the expectations were. I do know Patriot fans. In fact, I do know a real close friend of mine who lives in New England, diehard Patriots fan. I haven't even gotten his take on it. But looking at what Jared Mayo was able to do, there wasn't anything. They regressed from even last year's team. So, what was the expectation? I think it was something instead of nothing because this year it looks like nothing. Drake May made some progress, kind of stagnated a bit, kind of did what rookies have done. But then they still they had really no chance outside of the sorry Jets, really no chance of winning games when they went into these games. The adjustments from what I'm hearing online and some of these people that are talking in NFL rooms, not even particularly New England Patriots rooms, but they're just talking about how the end game decisions, the lack of decision making, the indecisiveness, and just seeming like he was in over his head. Now I'm hearing that more than I'm hearing about anything else. That he was in over his head. And when you look at how he had gotten there, well, yes, you're in over your head and you follow Bill Belichick. So that compounded what your expectations were supposed to be.
I can see that. I didn't watch enough Patriots games to be able to comment on his game decisions and clock management and things of that nature. So I really don't know. I just think uh, they didn't have high expectations, and I can't say that he failed as a coach this year. So I just question why they hire him in the first place.
Exactly. I really don't know why. Was it one of these like they're saying DEI hires? I can look at that because that's what the environment was conducive of. In fact, the Rooney Rule itself supports DEI anyways, if it's a thing or not. people acting like it's a good thing, but then when you accuse them of being a DEI hire, they get upset with that term. It's just an oxymoron when you think about it. But there were coaches, because I know people are making a racial issue out of it because we've seen that. You can't hide that. Social media is going to show that, whether it's going to be Facebook or Instagram or even YouTube. You read the comments, you have people saying that kind of a thing. But then you think about Frank Reich was even allowed to finish his season with Carolina before he was out the door. Years ago, Pete Carroll had 1 year with the Jets. He was out the door. So it's not unprecedented to have coaches who were one and done or not even completely done in Frank Reich's case before they were thrown out, before their first year was completed.
Yeah, it could be, maybe it's a culture thing. Maybe they didn't like what he brought to the table, or his leadership or lack thereof. So I mean, it's their franchise. It's up. They're free to hire and fire as they please.
Yeah.
So good luck to them.